thank you for joining us for this masterclass on how to crack sabers, how to write great entries. And I'm sure the starting point of that is when we do great PR work. And this is a celebration that we make happen. Really excited for the next edition, which is going to be happening in July, the award nights, and we'll talk more about the details. But today we're going to listen to Paul Holmes, who's going to give us great tips on how to make standout campaigns. And Paul doesn't need an introduction, but I'm still going to introduce him as the founder, CEO, and editor-in-chief for PRovoke Media. We all follow your work, Paul, and thank you for this partnership with PRCAI for bringing SABRE South Asia to life every time. So today's conversation, which we have a room full here on the screens, a lot of PR professionals from PR firms, from corporate communication departments, and all who want to know how can you get that beautiful trophy back home. So we are going to divide today's session into three parts. Let's just talk about a few campaigns. Then let's talk about certain specifics on how to choose categories, how juries look at the campaigns and the work while making their judging even more, productive, effective, and people can take some lessons from there. And thirdly, we'll talk about some specific dates.
Okay, I'm just going to jump in and
Yeah, thank you.
say,
You're coming back. I think that's the after effect of a lunch here. But
okay,
let's start with the very first question, Paul. And we will give some time for audience to ask any specific questions towards the end. But I'm going to start by some questions from our end. So we all know that good PR work is a step towards winning a saber. But a great campaign, if poorly written, can certainly go waste. So let's start the conversation today about what is your advice while submitting the SABRE entries for South Asia?
okay. So the first thing that I'm going to say is going to be completely counterintuitive and probably not particularly helpful, but it has occurred to me the last few years when we've done sessions like this, and based on the questions that I get from people who enter. So I want to say this before we jump into any specifics. Don't overthink things like format and presentation. Um, we we very deliberately want to be inclusive rather than exclusive, which means that we're looking for an excuse to consider great work. We're not looking for excuses to disqualify great work. So there's almost nothing you can do in the entry that will make us just sort of neglect your campaign. Um, and we have even been known to take things that were entered in one category and move them to a more suitable category if that's appropriate. Because the thing that matters to me and the thing that typically matters to nearly all of our judges is that we want to make sure that the best work gets recognized. So if you did great work and if you tell the story effectively, you don't have to spend hours agonizing over exactly what the presentation needs to look like or what the category choice should be. We're going to find a way to make sure that great work gets awards. And you can sort of see that in some of the winners from last year. The Undeka eye test, obviously, which was our number one campaign last year in South Asia, came with a great video, and the judges loved the video present part of the presentation. Um, but we also, as one of our top five campaigns, had the cheese crisis work that Westlife and McDonald's India submitted. And there was no video for that. It was a very traditional write-up. It was the classic two-page summary. Um, it wasn't, forgive me, if Avian We is on the call, it wasn't visually exciting as an entry. But it was a great campaign, and the substance of the campaign was what carried it over the finish line and got it the recognition. Um, so my first advice, my first advice is I hope I say useful things on this call that will make your entries better. But at the end of the day, if it's a great campaign, it will shine through however you enter it.
So, Paul, you talked about how to tell the story, right? I mean, we all are experts in telling a story, and even in those two classic pages that you said. But what are the mistakes that often practitioners make in putting that or bringing that to life?
Um, I think the thing that I see most that um that is can be off-putting, right? And look, the second thing I should say is that all of our judges have very different preferences and perspectives. We frequently see campaigns that fall flat in front of one group of judges and then is the best thing that the next group of judges have ever seen. There's a lot of subjectivity in the judging process. So what are the things that don't help? I think it's very important to make a clear statement up front about why you think this is a winning campaign. That first paragraph needs to grab people. And sort of burying the most impressive part of the campaign halfway down the first page or at the bottom of the second page is not helpful. So first of all, make sure that your first paragraph really grabs people and makes them want to read the rest of it. Um, there's a classic thing in journalism that first you tell people what you're going to tell them, then you tell them what you just told them. And we have a lot of judges who sort of read the first paragraph first and the last paragraph next, and then they read everything in between. Um, that is how you should make sure that you're emphasizing. This is why it was a great campaign at the beginning, and this is what it accomplished to make it a successful campaign at the end. Everything in the middle is helpful in terms of filling out the details. But if you can't grab people in the first and last paragraph, they may not even get to the middle. There's a lot of work being reviewed here, and judges are looking for reasons to read it all, and they're looking for reasons to dismiss it as well. So if you don't catch people's attention early on, that can be a problem. And then the other thing is, we like narrative stories. A succession of sort of, 30 bullet points is not the way to go. Much better to pick out four or five highlights from the execution than go through every single detail. At the end of the day, the two things that really matter what was the problem? How did you solve it? And what evidence do you have that your solution was successful? And if you explain those three things in a concise and compelling way, all of the stuff around that, the execution, the tactics, will just fall into place.
Okay, those is some great advice, Paul. We also get a sense sometimes when you see the results or when you see the kind of campaigns that shine, many of them align to social causes, right? And typically from Cannes to here, every time there's a trend, sometimes social impact is a trend, humor is a trend. But from a jury perspective, can you tell us that how do they see And can they differentiate what is authentic, brand differentiation between authentic brand activism and opportunistic storytelling? Do you see that judges can read through that?
Yeah. So, first of all, you're absolutely right that judges in awards competitions around the world tend to over-index on purpose,
Mhm.
um, on alignment with good causes. So I think people in our profession are looking to send two signals when they pick campaigns that we should celebrate. And the first signal is we can do work that really solves your business problems. And that's a signal we want to send to our clients and to, marketing and C-suite executives on the brand side. But the second signal that judges want to send is PR is a noble profession that does good things for the world. And sometimes judges get carried away with the second and therefore downplay the first. And that's a reality of I think every awards competition that I've ever seen, with the possible exception of the Effies, right? Because they are focused exclusively on effectiveness and that's their first stated criteria. I work personally very hard to try and draw people to campaigns that have real business impact first and purpose second. And I'm on every jury. I always tell people at the beginning, I'm just there to take notes. I'm just there to record their discussion and make a note of who they've selected as the winner. But I think, Deepti, because you've been a judge, and everybody else on this call who's ever been on a jury knows that I just can't help myself. I do get involved. I do offer opinions. I do try to emphasize what I think we should be emphasizing, which is that PR is effective and a powerful tool for achieving corporate success. Um, the second part, so I work against that bias, but I think we have to acknowledge that it's there. Um, and if you look at the campaigns that that we picked last year, I think you can see that there's a pretty healthy mix. So the Endeka eye test, which rose to the top, was obviously a very heavily purpose-driven campaign. And I know there have been questions about this elsewhere, but our judges felt that it was an authentic and appropriate and actually super smart use of as a huge event to make a sort of critical education message. I will say too that it fitted in with what I think was last year's theme in awards competitions around the world, which was tapping into cultural moments
Mhm.
to put your brand in front of a bigger audience. So this was both an example of purpose, clearly, but it was also about saying this is a huge cultural event and we can sort of connect with people through a cultural event. And sometimes, we've seen other campaigns where you're connecting with people through a new TV show or a rock concert, or in the case of the Gatorade campaign that did well last year, through sport. Um, that kind of ability to use culture to connect with people is also important. But if you then go down the list of winners, the the other campaigns on that list, the Don't Know Your Customer campaign from DigiYatra, which, if I'm being completely honest, was my favorite. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a personal subjective thing, was really about facing a business challenge and coming up with an incredibly creative, elegant solution to that business problem. It was also a great title, right? The don't know your customer thing is such a counterintuitive idea that everybody wanted to understand why a company would say that. So, but that wasn't particularly purpose driven. I mean, it was a brand promise
Yeah.
that really sort of enhanced the reputation of the company involved, particularly with that audience. The AI police tracking wasn't particularly purpose driven. I mean, it clearly had a social element to it. I'm guessing that the people whose number plates were tracked didn't feel particularly great about it, but it was a great campaign. And again, that was just a really smart use of a PR idea and a new technology to solve a pressing business problem. And finally, the navigating a cheese crisis was just pure textbook crisis PR.
Mhm.
And that's the other thing that I'm going to throw in at this point is, yeah, we love campaigns that are driven by purpose. We love campaigns that offer real solutions to business problems. But we also love campaigns that are just textbook examples of how you do it, right? So this wasn't an Indian campaign, so bear with me. But there was a campaign that came in the top 10 of our global list last year that was the closing of a coal-fired power plant in the UK.
Mhm.
And it was like, if you wanted to know how to close down a legacy business and get goodwill as a result rather than resentment as a result, how to handle employees and the community and the political environment while going through, this was the textbook example. It should be taught in universities around the world. This is how you do it. I felt the same way about the cheese crisis. There wasn't a blinding, brilliant, creative idea at the heart of it. Again, I feel like I'm being really mean to the folks at Avian We who sent it in. But it was one of those crisis management campaigns that honestly, if you put it on a university syllabus, would teach people 90% of what they need to know about how to manage a crisis. And sometimes that's what gets you an award is just doing it in an exemplary way. We still get thought leadership campaigns like that. I mean, thought leadership is in a lot of ways the most boring idea in PR, right? Everybody does thought leadership, everybody tries to beat everybody else in that game. But sometimes you see something that is so well crafted and so brilliantly executed and so effective in its results that you think to yourself, yeah, I've seen it before, but this is such a perfect example. We have to give it an award.
So Paul,
And
we have the video. So we'll take a minute to show. So Meghna, if you can put up the KYC video and then the Undekha test, let's see if they run on the screen.
In a country conditioned to surrender personal data, a new travel revolution was born. And it faced its toughest test, trust. This is the story of DigiYatra and the DKYC revolution. DigiYatra promised a future where your face was your boarding pass. Seamless, contactless, stress-free. Built not on paperwork, but on trust and technology. No innovation can fly without trust. Misinformation spreads like wildfire, fueled by speculation, fake news, and fear. Passengers feared DigiYatra was tracking their every move, storing their data, sharing it with authorities. Adoption slowed, doubts grew. A platform built on trust faced an existential question. Could it convince a nation to believe? We didn't react with denial. We answered with boldness. DKYC. Don't know your customer. In a world where every service demanded your data, DigiYatra stood alone, proudly saying, we don't collect it, we don't store it, we don't share it. DKYC was not a slogan. It was the centerpiece of a larger movement. Airports carried mythbuster FAQs. Government ministries issued official clarifications. 24/7 ORM teams responded to over 5,800 queries. Every rumor countered with facts. Every doubt was answered with design. The results spoke louder than the rumors. 9 million travelers embraced DigiYatra. App downloads surged by 30%. Over 12 million journeys made seamless without surrendering privacy. DKYC didn't just build DigiYatra's future, it redefined how a nation thought about digital freedom. No databases, no surveillance, just trust by design. DigiYatra, the revolution that let India fly free. Trust, freedom, flight.
Okay, so I hadn't seen that video in a long time. I remember loving it when I first saw it, and now I love it even more because it almost perfectly illustrates what I was saying earlier about what matters, right? There's very little in there about the execution beyond the use of government spokespeople to add credibility and to broaden and deliver the message. What there was a really clear statement of the problem, which was in this case driven by disinformation, and an indication that the problem was having a real impact on the business. And you could see that downloads were going down and that trust scores, which were in the campaign, were falling. And clearly it was having an effect. And then you had the core insight, which was this idea of don't know your customer, which is, I think, just a brilliant reversal of what business always says it wants to do. And it was attention grabbing and it made people look and dig deeper. There was a clear promise. There was evidence that the promise was being kept. And then there was the result, which was that the trust in the product was restored and downloads began once again to increase. And then beyond that, there was this idea that a movement had been created, which at that point is just the icing on the cake, right? But it's great because by doing it is a clear indication that by doing the right thing, both for your business and for your customers, you can create a race to the top rather than a race to the bottom. And all of that combined. Obviously, the video came with a written summary which contained a lot more detail. But if all we'd had was the video, we would have had enough to know that we wanted to recognize that campaign.
So, Paul, on that point, and I know we were going to cover this in a different section, but you talked about this video was powerful. How critical is the video as part of the entries? And if somebody doesn't choose to do the video, what would be the recommendation on a normal other ways, which again make it very compelling, the classic compelling for the jury to look into?
So we've always given people a huge amount of freedom in how they present their entries. And we have never insisted on video for, I think, two reasons. First of all, I've always said, people are tired of hearing me say this, it's your story and you know how to tell it. If you think you can tell a story effectively using words, I am the last person to disagree with you because I'm a words person, right? I'm a writer. So if you feel you can tell the story in a compelling way in a two-page summary, I'm not going to tell you that you shouldn't do that. The second thing, historically, is that until relatively recently, video was out of reach for some people. There are campaigns that are done on a shoestring budget. This is particularly true in, emerging markets and for nonprofit clients. And it used to be that creating a 60-second video, um, and that we just saw was a very polished video. I have no idea how much it cost to put together, but I'm guessing it cost more than the entry to put together. And you know how it is in the South Asia Awards. There are people who find the entry fee to be an obstacle still. So saying on top of that, and you have to create a video that costs five, ten, whatever, $1,000 is it's going to make it difficult for people to enter. And we don't want to discriminate against small agencies or small teams or small budgets, because one of the things that we really believe is that great work can happen in a billion-dollar global PR firm. And it can happen with one person working out of their home, having a brilliant creative idea. And we want to make sure that we get the best of all of those sort of works. Now, I always tell people about one of the first ever SABRE Awards when there are going to be some people on the call who don't even understand these words. But this was so long ago that we would get entries in binders, and at the back of the binder, there would be a VHS tape, which you played in your VHS video recorder to watch the video. And the judges never wanted to watch the videos because it took so long to get them out and get them set up and run them through and then rewind them. And I remember going through an entire competition in North America where the judges only wanted to see one video out of about 200 that we received. And that one video was for the Victoria's Secret fashion show. And I think that their motives for wanting to see it had nothing to do with the campaign. So video used to be an afterthought. Today, I would say half of our judges look for the video first.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to pretend that video is unimportant. But what I am saying is if you have a great campaign and no video, and again, I come back to the avian weed cheese crisis, right? If you have a great campaign with no video, that's fine. The judges will do the work to figure out that it's a good campaign and it will get recognized. Um, but video helps. It makes judges' lives easier. I've seen, just as an aside, I've seen judges laugh and cry at videos. I've never seen them cry at a written summary. So it does have that visceral impact. So I guess the answer, very long answer to your question, but I guess the short answer is if you can include video, it's a good idea to do so. But if you can't, and you have confidence that the campaign was special, it'll still get recognized.
Sure. And I think in the world of AI that we all are living in, possibly to create assets in a very different way than typically it has been and more cost effective. So that's a good advice.
Yes.
But going back, Paul, still from a consistency perspective, would you have some tip for people who are writing an entry like 2 pages, 3 pages? Don't go like 20 slides, anything like that, so that they can also be more focused and effective. Because as
Yep.
you rightly said, jury are seeing about 60 to 70 entries. So any tip when you're not doing a video, but how to really make your entry very compelling? And is there some guidance on
Yeah.
a word limit or anything like that?
We are horrible to our juries. Our judges have to do a lot of work and a lot of reading, and we sort of hope that the learning will be its own reward, but it is a lot of work. And so there are some pretty obvious things. I mean, first of all, make it as readable as possible. Anything, if you're writing, if it's just sort of text, anything over 2 pages is going to make the judges impatient and therefore perhaps a little resentful. I would say that anything over 5 or 6 slides, unless you're really giving them something visually exciting, is too much. Um, Having said that, I've seen entries that came in on 20 slides that the judges just loved because the story was compelling. But in general, don't make our judges work harder than they already have to. If you can go away with the judges feeling like you made their job easier rather than more difficult, that's obviously a good thing. Um, and try, even if you're just doing written text, try and put in a couple of things that are graphically interesting for people who process information visually. Um, don't don't go below. I used to say 10 point. I think I'll say 11 point for this. And don't, 2 pages of 9 point single spaced text is just as bad as 4 pages of regular text, right? You try and make this easy on the eyes and easy on the brain.
That's a great point. Paul, we're going to talk of one very specific section, and this cuts through all the entries or even one very special category, which is measurement. And I remember being in one of the jury rounds with you, where you were in a position to say that the entries in measurement is not up to the mark. And in fact, we should not be giving an award this year. And that's the call that the jury chair, as a jury chair, and the jury took. So let's talk a bit about why measurement is so important. And secondly, if you can give an example in particular, that how to make measurement rich, how should that be a part of all the campaign presentation and specifically the measurement category?
Yeah. So one of the things that tends to happen around the world is that, and this is not specific to South Asia by any stretch of the imagination. I'm trying to remember examples, but um, is that people will say, this campaign got great results. We should put it in the measurement category. And that's not what the measurement category is for, right? The measurement category is for campaigns that are measured in a way that is either innovative or particularly compelling. So it's not, oh, we got more media impressions on this campaign than we've ever got on any campaign before. It should get an award for measurement. That's not how the category works, right? The category works by going beyond things like impressions and opportunities to see and to actually giving us a dashboard of what the impact of the campaign was on either one particularly compelling dimension or on multiple interesting dimensions. And so we're looking for, and so the reality is that today there are dozens of services out there that are measuring reputation in really, I'm using reputation as a particular example, that are measuring reputation in a particularly sophisticated way. You know, there are companies like Karma and Caliber and RepTrack and, you know, that are actually doing a great job of measuring reputation. And campaigns where there is some sort of outside source that is verifying that what you did had a cause and effect relationship on how stakeholders view your organization are always welcome in that kind of campaign, in that kind of category, in the measurement and evaluation arena. So are campaigns that very clearly show that there is a cause and effect relationship between what you did and an increase in sales, what you did and an increase in employee loyalty, what you did and an increase in brand trust, what you did and an increase in the share price, right? But we're looking for tangible results that go beyond how many people clicked, how many people viewed, how many people engaged. We're looking in that category for evidence that it impacted the business. And what we tend to get instead is look at our massive impressions and how many people liked our video on TikTok. Um, that's a fine result in the social media category, right? It's a fine result in the branding category even. But in the measurement and evaluation category, we are looking for something beyond just, you know, what you were able to count up, you
Yeah.
know, on social media or traditional media. And we didn't see a lot of that last year. And actually, what we sometimes, this is a little unfair, but we saw campaigns in other categories that I thought to myself, actually, we could give that an award for measurement. We didn't see those campaigns in the measurement category, which I guess is a way, if you're ready, to segue into category strategy.
Absolutely. And that was my next question. The category strategy. How do people choose? Where do they put it? How many entries? Is there a thumb rule around that?
So I think I think I've already said don't overthink it, and I still say don't overthink it. Um, but I do have a number of pieces of advice. The first is that regardless of the campaign, you should always take advantage of the free category rule that we have, which is that every campaign can be submitted into a geographic category, a practice area category, and an industry sector category for the basic entry price. So you should always find at least one category in each of those columns that works. The geographic category is almost self-explanatory, right? We have India, we have a number of other South Asian markets, and then we have regional and even global market campaigns. The practice area should be fairly intuitive. I will say a couple of things there that I think are probably obvious to everybody, but think a little bit about what you see out there in the market and plan appropriately. So there are a lot of special events. There are a lot of media relations campaigns. There are a lot of influencer marketing campaigns. So if you are entering only those categories, you are going to be up against 30 or 40 or sometimes more other campaigns in that category. But there are other areas where there are perhaps fewer entries. Um, I'm just sort of looking down my list of categories here to see if I can. So we don't get a huge number of entries in things like corporate culture and change. We don't get as many entries in business to business marketing as we should. We don't get a lot of crisis work. We don't get a lot of financial and IPO work. We get a ton of integrated marketing, but we don't get as many entries in the two marketing consumer categories, which are new product and existing product. So think about where you would expect to see a lot of competition and aim for those places where there's less. Um, I know that so I always think about the corporate, what I think of as the corporate categories. So financial communications, which is basically capital markets, crisis management, even employee communications. I don't know. There are three reasons, I think, why we don't get as much work in those categories. The first reason is that there's a lot of work that is done in those categories that is confidential in nature. And there's nothing we can do about that. I mean, we do make it clear that you can mark your entry as confidential and it will not go beyond the judges. We won't publish it anywhere. I mean, we'll publish the fact that it won, but we won't publish any of the details of the campaign anywhere. It won't be put up on our website as an example of great work. So we do respect confidentiality as far as possible. The second reason is that a lot of that work is done in-house, and in-house teams do not present as many campaigns as agencies. But I would say that when we get in-house work, a lot of it is really, really good. And last year in South Asia, we saw a lot of work that came out of Godrej without agency support, that was done by an in-house creative team that was as good as anything we saw. And then the third reason, I think, is that people think that work isn't as sexy, right? That sort of a good corporate image campaign can be a little sort of solid and a little and not, there are no celebrities involved. There's not a lot of social media buzz about it. It doesn't come with TikTok videos. It can be quite serious. I hope that I've conveyed already that I like serious. I want more serious work. I want work that impacts your share price. I want work that makes your employees more likely to be advocates than detractors in the marketplace. I like that stuff. And I'd love to see more really good corporate reputation-oriented work. The final thing I'll say is that around the industry sector categories. So we give our judges instructions around the industry sector categories that, for example, in the fashion and beauty campaign category, I don't know if we even do fashion and beauty for South Asia because it's kind of a niche that we've had elsewhere. Let's say oh, we do fashion and beauty. Great. Okay. So in the fashion and beauty category, it can be a consumer campaign marketing fashion and beauty products, but it can also be an employee communications campaign by a beauty brand. So if Procter and Gamble is doing an employee communications campaign, that is a legitimate entry in the fashion and beauty category. We're looking for the best work in the sector, not the best marketing in the sector. And so you can always find an industry sector and a practice area for your campaign. And if you can find more than one, even better, because then we get more money and you get more chances.
Yeah. Paul, let's talk about the IN2 category versus the regular category that was introduced about 2 years ago. In fact, we put out the results in advance. I don't know if you're going to do that again this time, but let's talk about that because there was some perception. Is it the same saber, equal? So it's just another category, right? But it is the saber and the same. Would you like to talk about how is IN2 different to regular categories, but making them both saber equivalent? So
Yeah, the sort of simplest explanation for this, I think, is that the traditional sabers represent campaigns and the into sabers represent the building blocks of campaigns. So we if we're looking at giving something an award, maybe I don't want to overcomplicate this, right? But the traditional saber categories represent the whole thing, strategy, execution, results. The into sabers represent an element of the campaign. So if you produced a great TikTok video, that can win an into saber just on the quality of the creative product. It was a great video. Okay. If you want it to win in a broader saber category, then it needs to be part of an overall campaign. But what we're looking for it into is just honestly, and this is why I don't think into is a subcategory or it's is we're looking for great craftsmanship. So here's something that I believe. There's something that drives me crazy in the PR world is that we all talk about creative agencies and PR agencies as if they're two different things, as if creative agencies are just, and what we mean by creative agencies are advertising agencies, right? But I look at what the creative output of an ad agency is, and it's always an ad. I look at what the creative output of a PR agency is, and it's a live event. It's a TikTok video. It's a tweet. It's a new AI tool. It's a measurement system. It's a data and analytics sort of product. Our creative output is so much more varied and so much more interesting. We work across everything, experiential, digital, traditional media, data. We work across all of that. We work across paid and earned and shared and owned. We produce annual reports. We produce ESG and environmental reporting. We produce so much content, and it's so much more creative than, the same old 30-second commercial that you get from an advertising agency every time you walk in the door. And we created Into to showcase just how much creative product there is coming out of PR agencies. So I don't regard it as in any way as sort of, second class Sabre Awards. It's just for something different. It's to showcase the craft in our business. And by the way, how different that craft sometimes looks, right? Because one of the great things about PR is if you go to an ad agency with a challenge, um, and you say we're looking to solve this particular problem. They go away, and 6 months later they come back and they've recruited a superstar director and they've got a celebrity to be in the ad, and they'll go off on location and film it for $500,000 or whatever it is and come back. PR people will get a regular person, take them out into the city in front of the office, shoot it on an iPhone, and have the video ready to go in 5 minutes. And that to me is much more creative and much more authentic than anything that an ad agency can do with a giant production budget. And I want to celebrate that work and showcase it. So that's where Into came from.
So I hope we'll see a lot more into entries this time,
Yeah,
increase.
it
Taking the
has
lead,
been
taking
very
that opportunity.
steadily increasing.
Yeah.
And the work we saw in Into last year was really special. Um, and actually, we should talk. We haven't talked about this. It just comes to me. We should talk about this. If we do announce the Into first, we should also announce 5 of the Into campaigns that are contenders for Best in Show in
Wonderful.
Into, and then hand out that award at the event alongside all the other sabers so that's clear. But that, we can have 2 Best in Shows. We've done that in other regions.
Oh, that's interesting. Absolutely. Anybody has any burning questions? I know you all have been in this process for a couple of years, but something that you really want to ask, maybe we have time for 2 questions. Okay, good. If we don't have, I'm sure we can make this video available if you want to revisit it. But Paul, let's close the conversation by just sharing a couple of key dates ahead. And what are we looking? We are already live with the portal, so if you can.
We'll go live today or first thing tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Though I can't believe that anybody is going to go straight back to their office from this meeting and start submitting as soon as they can. But we'll go live, yeah, tomorrow morning at the latest.
Okay, so the key dates, we are live tomorrow. There is an early submission, early deadline around April.
Yep.
And
Sorry, I thought you had the dates,
okay,
so I don't have them in
yeah.
front of me.
So early deadline is April 10th, and then
Yep.
the late deadline, I think, is May 12th, but we will definitely share that information via an email with our member base. And
Right. The
the
as a
award.
reminder, the late deadline costs a little more. So if you can hit the early deadline, you should, though you're all PR people and none of you will.
Yes, that's a great advice. And the awards will be held in Mumbai on 16th of July. So that's the key dates for the team. So we'll encourage you to go to the portal once it's live and start thinking if you can meet the early deadline and then the last deadline. We also know a lot of time people want to re-clarify how the entries are costed. And we absolutely help with have help with the Paul's team, and we can clarify all those things for you. So we know that Pat has always been very helpful as a support for that, and Sarah. So we can reach out, but you can reach out to me, and we'll be able to help those, overcome those kind of questions or queries as we go along.
Yeah.
Any last words, Paul, before we close?
I will say that we listened to you from last year and we didn't raise our entry fees at all this year.
Thank you. Thank you. You really did the right thing today, Paul, because yes, we haven't raised the entry fee, Paul. So thank you so much for bringing
And
that.
and as always, the best campaigns that are entered in the South Asia competition are automatic. So the winners are automatically entered into the Asia Pacific competition, where India has a very good track record of success. Not just India, actually, we've had sort of top 5 campaigns from Sri Lanka and Pakistan over the years. The whole South Asia region contributes massively to the Asia Pacific Awards. And of course, the best campaigns from both South Asia and the Asia Pacific Awards get recognized at our global event every year. There's nearly always an Indian campaign in the top 10 globally. We see terrific work from your region. It gets better every year. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what you've come up with this year.
Okay, thank you for all those advices and the great session, Paul. And we will be in touch if there are more questions. But thank you, everybody, for
Of course.
joining. And let's get ready to fill in our entries, evaluate our work, and let's celebrate great work together.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
very much.
everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deepti. Thank you, Paul.